In the scattered and dying light of the 41st millennium, humanity is a specter haunting the ruins of its own ambition, a sprawling, numberless swarm clinging to the edge of a galaxy that has long since turned against it. There are, we are told, more than 1 million worlds that fly the banner of the twin-headed Aquila, 1 million bastions of faith and fury against the encroaching dark. 1 million planets, each a prayer screamed into the void, each a fortress built on the bones of forgotten martyrs. But this is a story of empires, of heroes, of primarchs and gods. It is a chronicle written in starfire and blood, a saga meant to inspire, to awe, to justify the endless, grinding sacrifice. It is not, however, the truth, not the whole truth. The real story of the Imperium of Man is not found in the gilded halls of the Senatorum Imperialis on Terra, nor is it etched into the adamantium hulls of its star-faring cathedrals of war. The true story, the one whispered in the deepest shadows and silenced by the crack of a shock maul, is the story of the planetary citizen. It is the tale of the uncounted, the unremembered, the trillions upon trillions of souls who are born, who toil, and who die, not for glory or for honor, but because they are the fuel. They are the living, breathing mortar that holds the crumbling walls of the Imperium together. Join us as we pull back the veil of propaganda, as we descend from the Empyrean heights of myth into the choking, corrosive reality of the everyday. Let us walk the rusted gantries of the hive cities and breathe the recycled air of the underhive. Let us feel the pulse of the great manufactorums that beat like monstrous hearts. The question we must ask is not how does the Imperium survive, but what is the cost of that survival, and who truly pays the price? The story of the common man, the common woman, is a horrifying epic of its own, a silent testament to a species that has sacrificed its own humanity in order to save itself. Imagine, if you will, the simple act of birth. In our time, it is a moment of hope, of potential. In the Imperium, on a world like Necromunda or Armageddon, it is the sounding of a bell, tolling the start of a sentence. A soul is not born. A new cog is forged for the great, insatiable machine. There is no gentle light, no sterile room. There is the clang of metal, the stench of industrial chemicals and human effluvia, the drone of machinery that never, ever ceases. A child enters the world not to the cooing of a parent, but to the shriek of a nearby smelter. Its first breath is not of clean air, but of a toxic soup, a chemical haze that will stain its lungs for the entirety of its short, brutal life. This is the mercy of the hive world. From that very first moment, the citizen is bound by a debt that can never be repaid, a debt to the emperor for their life, a debt to the planet's governor for their rationed sustenance, a debt to the machine god for the technology that keeps the hive from collapsing in on itself. Education, as we would understand it, is a fantasy. Instead, there is indoctrination. The child learns the catechisms of the imperial creed, learns to chant the litanies of hatred against the mutant, the alien, the heretic. They learn that their life has but one purpose: to work, to obey, and to die in the emperor's name. Their alphabet is the maker's mark on a lasgun casing. Their mathematics is the calculation of production quotas. Their history is a heavily redacted, brutally simplified myth of glory and righteous slaughter. Any deviation, any question, any spark of curiosity beyond their designated function is not merely discouraged, it is a sin. It is heresy in its most nascent form, a cancer to be excised before it can spread. They are taught to fear the dark between the stars, but the true horror is the suffocating, artificial light of their own world, a light that offers no warmth, only the cold, unblinking glare of constant surveillance. Their gods are distant and silent, their masters are cruel and unseen, and their only hope is the promise of a glorious death, a promise that is, like so many others, a carefully constructed lie. This is the foundation upon which the Imperium is built, a citizenry born into servitude, conditioned for obedience, and destined for a life of grueling, meaningless labor in service to a cause they can never truly comprehend. They are told they are the bulwark against terror. The tragic irony, the secret that screams from every corroded rivet and every weeping pipe, is that for the vast majority of mankind, the terror is already here. It is their home. The life of the planetary citizen is a symphony of noise, a constant, oppressive cacophony that grinds down the soul until there is nothing left but a hollowed-out shell of reflex and duty. Consider the hive worker, the archetypal subject of the Imperium. Their existence is governed not by the rising and setting of a sun they have never seen, but by the shriek of the lumen siren that signals the start and end of their work cycle, a cycle that can last 12, 14, 18 hours. Sleep is a commodity, a rationed blessing stolen in a cramped, fungus-ridden hab unit, where the sound of the hive city, the groaning of stressed metal, the distant rumble of macro transports, the screams of the unfortunate, is a constant, inescapable lullaby. The worker rises in the stale, recycled air, consumes a nutrient paste, known colloquially as corpse starch, a name that is not metaphor, but a literal description of its primary ingredient, a fact known but never spoken aloud. It is the ultimate act of filial piety in the Imperium, to be consumed by the next generation, to become the very substance that fuels their continued servitude. The journey to the manufactorum is a descent into a metallic hell. They join a tide of humanity, a river of gray-clad bodies flowing through choked, claustrophobic transit tubes and across precarious, swaying gantries that stretch across chasms of unimaginable depth. The sheer press of bodies is a force of nature, and to fall is to be lost forever. Your scream swallowed by the abyss. Your absence noted only as a fractional drop in your designated work unit's productivity quota. Once inside the manufactorum, the true horror begins. Imagine a cathedral dedicated not to a god of light, but to a god of industry. A space so vast that its ceiling is lost in smog and shadow, filled with machines the size of mountains. Pistons like colossal hammers pound down in a relentless, deafening rhythm, shaking the very foundations of the world. Rivers of molten metal flow in incandescent channels, casting a demonic glow on the faces of the workers. Here, human beings are extensions of the machinery. They are the soft parts, the biological components that guide, that clean, that replace, that die when a cog slips or a pressure valve bursts. Safety is not a concern. It is a luxury the Imperium cannot afford. The air is thick with airborne toxins, with microscopic shards of metal that embed themselves in the lungs, ensuring that even if a worker survives the daily threat of industrial accidents, their life will be cut short by a catalog of agonizing diseases. They handle volatile chemicals with little more than rags for protection. They work inches from gears that could grind a man to pulp in an instant. The toll is immense. The Medicaid stations, if they can be called that, are little more than charnel houses, where the grievously injured are either patched up with crude bionics and sent back to the line, or given the Emperor's peace, with a bolt pistol to the head. We have a recovered fragment, a Vox log from a mid-hive foreman, a man named Grolvo, his voice a low rasp against the thunder of his workplace. Log entry 7,412. Unit 9 lost another one today. Slipped into the chemical vats. Didn't even have time to scream. We met the quota. That's what matters. The Redemptor priest came, said his sacrifice pleases the Omnissiah, sprinkled some sacred oil on the vat's rim, told the rest of the unit his spirit was now part of the blessed solution. They seemed content with that. I marked him as expired. The administratum will send a replacement. They always do. The machine must be fed. The machine, always, must be fed. This is the apex of a citizen's life. This is their purpose. Not to create, not to build a better future, but to be consumed by the present. To give their sweat, their blood, and ultimately their life, to maintain a status quo of unending war and unimaginable suffering. And the tragedy is that they believe in it. The ecclesiarchy has done its work well. They see their suffering not as oppression, but as piety. Their pain is a prayer. Their death in the gears of the machine is a martyr's ascension. They are the forgotten cogs in a machine that is racing towards an abyss, and they praise the very engine that is devouring them. Should a citizen survive the gauntlet of childhood indoctrination and the brutal crucible of the manufactorum, what future awaits them? It is a landscape of diminishing returns, a slow, inexorable slide into obsolescence. The human body is frail, a vessel of flesh and blood in a galaxy that respects only steel and fire. For the hive worker, their 40s are old age. Their body, ravaged by malnutrition, pollution, and relentless toil, begins to fail. Their eyesight dims in the perpetual twilight of the Hab unit. Their lungs, choked with industrial residue, burn with every breath. Their muscles, strained and torn, ache with a pain that never subsides. In a society that values only productivity, a broken worker is a useless worker. They become a drain on the system, a mouth to feed that offers no return. And the Imperium is brutally, terrifyingly efficient at trimming waste. For some, the path leads to the underhive. Cast out from their work unit, stripped of their meager rations and shelter, they descend. They fall, literally and metaphorically, into the lawless, lightless depths that form the foundations of every hive city. The underhive is a place forgotten by the light of the Emperor, a sprawling, anarchic realm where the only law is survival. Here, humanity reverts to its most primal state. Gangs rule through terror and violence, carving out territories in the skeletal ruins of ancient, forgotten structures. Mutants, the physically and genetically damned, prowl the shadows, products of generations of exposure to toxic waste and unchecked mutation. Life in the underhive is a desperate scramble for scraps. The inhabitants scavenge for archaeotech, filter putrid water from sump lakes, and hunt the grotesque fauna that has evolved in the darkness. Cannibalism is not a taboo. It is a practical solution to a constant food shortage. The greatest fear is not death, but something far worse. The gangs, the mutants, the monstrous things that crawl in the deepest pits, these are all threats. But they are a known quantity. The true, unspoken terror is that the underhive is not truly forgotten. It is a resource pit, a dumping ground, and a hunting ground for those above. The Adeptus Arbites, the iron fist of imperial law, will launch punitive raids, cleansing entire sections with fire and fury, not to impose order, but simply to remind the depths who is master. Worse still are the whispers of other visitors. Tech priests from the Adeptus Mechanicus, searching for forgotten technology or, more chillingly, for fresh biological components for their servitors. Dark cults, seeking to curry favor with forbidden powers in a place where the emperor's gaze is weak. And the slavers, who harvest the desperate and the unwary, selling them to masters whose cruelty is limited only by their imagination. There is another path, one offered as a glimmer of hope, a chance for salvation, the Imperial Guard. For many, this is seen as the only way out. A life of service in the Astra Militarum promises purpose, a steady supply of food, and the chance to see a sky, any sky, even if it is an alien one. It is an escape from the crushing monotony and slow death of the hive. This, of course, is the greatest lie of all. The recruiting posters show proud soldiers, their jawlines firm, their lasguns held high against a backdrop of alien worlds and vanquished foes. The reality is that the Imperial Guard is a meat grinder on a galactic scale. The citizen trades one form of servitude for another, swapping the relative safety of the manufactorum for a war zone where the average life expectancy can be measured in hours. They are given a weapon they barely know how to use, a uniform that is little more than a shroud, and are thrown against the horrors of the galaxy, the ravenous tyrannid swarms, the unholy legions of chaos, the technologically superior Tau, the soulless Necrons. As one famous guardsman's lament, found scrawled on the wall of a trench on Vrax, puts it, "I was told I would see the galaxy. I have seen it. It is a charnel house. I was told I would fight for the Emperor. I have fought. I have only fed the crows. I was told I would die a hero. I will die here, in the mud, and no one will remember my name." For the planetary citizen, there are no good choices. There are only different paths to the same end. Whether they fall into the gears of a machine, the jaws of a sump croc in the Underhive, or the bayonet of an orc, their fate is sealed from the moment of their birth. They are a statistic, a number on an administratum slate, a single drop of blood in an ocean of sacrifice. Their lives are not stories. They are expenditures. Let us now turn our gaze from the choking spires of the Hive worlds and travel to a different kind of hell, one forged in the name of logic and reason. Let us journey to a forge world, a planet-sized factory that is the domain of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the disciples of the machine god. Here, the horrors are not of chaotic squalor, but of cold, calculated, and terrifying order. On a forge world, the air itself tastes of metal and ozone. The sky is a permanent, bruised twilight, perpetually obscured by a shroud of holy incense and industrial smog, shot through with the pulsing, rhythmic glow of plasma conduits that crisscross the landscape like glowing veins. The very ground beneath your feet is not rock or soil, but layers of compacted machinery, a geological strata of forgotten technology built up over 10,000 years. The citizens here are not merely workers. They are referred to in the cold, precise lexicon of the tech priests as bioassets or organic components. Their relationship with the machine is not one of operator, but of integration. The central creed of the cult Mechanicus is the belief that the flesh is weak. It is a corruptible, inefficient, and ultimately flawed medium. The machine, in its perfect logic and tireless function, is holy. Salvation, therefore, is found in the shedding of the flesh, in the glorious union of man and machine. This is not a metaphor. For the common citizen of a forge world, life is a slow, methodical process of disassembly. From birth, they are seen not as children, but as raw materials. Their potential is measured in their resilience, their dexterity, their ability to withstand the sacred rites of augmentation. They are raised in sterile creches, their development monitored not for emotional well-being, but for biological efficiency. Their education consists of learning binary canticles, maintenance rites, and schematics for holy machinery. To show excessive emotion is a sign of fleshly weakness. To question the logic of a superior is tech heresy. The fate of the average citizen is to be physically and spiritually dismantled. As they work in the great forges, surrounded by the chanting of tech priests and the hum of unknowable energies, they are subject to constant modification. A faulty eye is replaced with a mercilessly efficient optical sensor. A weak arm is amputated and replaced with a powerful hydraulic claw. Lungs that struggle with the toxic atmosphere are bypassed in favor of a clunky, wheezing rebreather unit fused directly to their spine. Each augmentation is seen as a blessing, a step closer to the perfection of the machine. But with each step, something is lost. Memory, personality, free will, these are the inefficiencies of the flesh, and they are scoured away. The citizen slowly ceases to be a person and becomes a tool, their mind scrubbed and repurposed, their body a grotesque patchwork of metal and meat. There is a term for the end point of this process: servitor. This is the greatest fear and the highest aspiration for the Forge World's populace. To become a servitor is to achieve a state of pure function. The brain is wiped clean of all personality, all memory, all sense of self. It is surgically altered, lobotomized, and hardwired with a single, repetitive task. A concert pianist might have his arms replaced with powerful drills, and his mind programmed to do nothing but bore holes in adamantium plating for the rest of his existence. A poet might become a walking fuel pump, their consciousness reduced to monitoring pressure levels in a plasma reactor. They are living machines, their souls extinguished to make way for cold, unthinking purpose. We have an excerpt from the private writings of a low-level tech acolyte, a scribe logist named Umberto, before he was purged for his heretical sentimentality. I watch them, the menials. They move with a purpose I can no longer find in myself. Their eyes are milky white, their faces slack. Yesterday, I saw one, a loader unit, designated 7-kilo row. It had a scar above its left eye socket, an old one, from before. It faltered for a moment, its hydraulic arm twitching, its head tilted, as if listening to a song no one else could hear. Then the magas in charge delivered the litany of pure motive force, and the unit resumed its task. But for a single, terrifying second, I did not see a machine. I saw a ghost. A ghost trapped in its own corpse, screaming into a void that will never answer. The Omnissiah save me. What have we become? Are we building gods, or are we just designing more elegant cages for our own souls? This is the insidious horror of the Forge world. It is not a quick death in the jaws of a monster, but a slow, methodical erasure of the self. It is a damnation disguised as salvation, a promise of immortality that delivers only oblivion. The citizen on a Forge world does not simply die. They are unwritten, their story erased page by page, until all that remains is a soulless, functional husk, another perfect, silent part of the great, cold machine. The Imperium, in its vastness, contains multitudes of horrors, each tailored to the nature of the world that births them. We have seen the grinding, impersonal cruelty of the Hive world and the cold, surgical damnation of the Forge world. But one might imagine there are better places to live, worlds where a semblance of a natural life is possible. Let us travel to an agri-world, one of the million breadbaskets that feed the ravenous machine of the Imperium. From orbit, an agri-world can seem like a paradise, a lush green and blue jewel in the void. Vast continents of cultivated fields, shimmering oceans, a breathable atmosphere. This is the image the Imperium presents, a bucolic idol, a reward for the faithful. The reality, as always, is a carefully painted lie. The life of a citizen on an agri-world is not one of peaceful communion with nature. It is a life of feudal serfdom, a return to a primitive brutality that predates the stars. The planet is owned, every last square inch of it, by a powerful and distant noble house, or by the ecclesiarchy itself. The citizens are serfs, bound to the land they work, their lives and the lives of their children owned by their masters. They live in primitive settlements, hovels made of mud and wood, with no technology more advanced than what their overseers permit. They rise before the sun, a real sun this time, but its light brings no joy. It is a relentless, punishing glare that bakes the fields and burns their skin. They toil from dawn until dusk, using primitive tools to cultivate crops that are often alien, hostile, and barely understood. The work is backbreaking, repetitive, and endless. Generations are born, live, and die in the same 50-square-mile plot of land, their entire universe defined by the furrows they plow. Their masters, the planetary nobility, live in opulent palaces, floating fortresses of marble and gold that drift serenely above the endless fields, their inhabitants utterly disconnected from the suffering that sustains their luxurious lifestyle. They see the serfs not as people, but as a resource, like soil or water. The planetary tithe is all that matters. A certain percentage of the food produced must be given to the Imperium. Failure to meet this tithe is not an option. If a harvest fails due to blight or drought, the masters will not lessen the tithe. They will simply take it, leaving the serfs to starve. This is not a bug in the system. It is the system. The serfs are expendable. The tithe is sacred. We have a translation of a plea, scratched onto a piece of bark and found in the ruins of a starved village on the agri-world of Sepphoris Secundus. To the masters in the Sky Palace. The rot blight has taken the core wheat. The river has run black with poison from the mountains. We have nothing. Our children's bellies are swollen with hunger. We have eaten the seed grain for next year's planting. We have eaten the dirt eaters. We have eaten our dead. We beg you, for the love of the golden throne, leave us enough to survive the winter. We are your faithful. We are your children. The plea was never answered. The black ships of the administratum arrived, took their tithe from the granaries, and left the planet to its fate. The following year, new serfs were imported from an overpopulated hive world, and the cycle began anew. Life here is also ruled by superstition and fear. With no access to education or technology, the serfs are steeped in a primitive, fearful version of the imperial creed. They see the emperor's will in the patterns of the clouds and the touch of daemons in a failed crop. Strange beasts, remnants of the planet's native fauna, or the result of failed terraforming, stalk the edges of the fields. To venture too far is to invite death. The only authority they know is the local confessor, a fire and brimstone preacher who enforces obedience through fear and promises of a better life after death. It is a simple, effective form of control. This pastoral paradise is a psychological prison. It starves the body and suffocates the mind. It offers the illusion of a natural life, but is just as artificial and cruel as the manufactorums of the hive. The citizen is trapped in a loop of back-breaking labor and abject poverty, their only purpose to produce food they will likely never eat, for a faceless empire they will never see, all under a vast, open sky that serves only to mock their confinement. It is a quiet horror, a slow, grinding despair, but it is horror nonetheless. It demonstrates a core truth of the Imperium. There is no escape, whether the cage is made of steel or of open plains. It is a cage all the same. From the feigned simplicity of the farm to the feigned piety of the temple, the methods of control may change, but the outcome remains immutable. Let us now consider the life of a citizen on a shrine world, or a cardinal world. These are planets designated as holy sites, perhaps the birthplace of a famous saint, the site of a great miracle, or home to a particularly ancient and revered cathedral. To the faithful across the galaxy, these are beacons of hope, worlds bathed in the Emperor's divine grace. To be born on such a world is considered an immense blessing. In reality, it is to be born into a society of absolute, suffocating fanaticism. On a shrine world, the imperial creed is not merely the state religion, it is the air, the water, and the very fabric of existence. Every moment of every day is dedicated to worship, penance, and the paranoid pursuit of ideological purity. The planet's landscape is a monument to this obsession. The surface is almost entirely covered by continent-spanning cathedrals, towering reliquaries, and sprawling pilgrimage plazas. The architecture is a study in Gothic excess, designed to dwarf the individual, to impress upon them their own insignificance before the majesty of the emperor and the ecclesiarchy. Billions of pilgrims flock to these worlds, and the native citizens are the infrastructure that supports this endless tide of devotion. They are the keepers of the shrines, the scribes of holy texts, the manufacturers of devotional trinkets, the janitors who scrub the blood of penitents from the plaza flagstones. Their work is considered a sacred duty, and they are compensated not with wealth, but with proximity to holiness, a currency that buys nothing but promises. Life is a constant performance of faith. Citizens are expected to attend multiple daily services, to engage in public acts of self-flagellation to atone for sins they may or may not have committed, and to be able to recite thousands of pages of scripture from memory. A single misspoken word in a litany, a moment of hesitation in a prayer, can be interpreted as a sign of heresy. And on a shrine world, the accusation of heresy is a death sentence, often carried out publicly and creatively to serve as a lesson to others. The society is stratified not by wealth or birth, but by perceived piety. At the top are the cardinals and high-ranking priests of the ecclesiarchy, living in unimaginable luxury, their power absolute. Beneath them are the various orders of holy warriors, the Sisters of Battle, and the fanatical redemptionist cults who roam the streets, eager to administer the Emperor's judgment with flame and chainsword to anyone they deem impure. At the very bottom is the common citizen, their life a constant, terrified effort to appear devout enough to avoid notice. There is a chilling account from a document known as the Lament of the Pious Man, a secret diary found hidden in the wall of a hab block on the cardinal world of Ophelia Zseven. The author is anonymous, for obvious reasons. Another day of blessings. I rose and gave thanks for the Emperor's light. I scourged my back for the sin of dreaming of a world with a blue sky. I attended the matin service and sang the hymns of Saint Catherine with all my heart, my eyes fixed on the cardinal's golden pulpit, lest my gaze wander and be found wanting. At my workstation, I polished the sacred casings of bolter shells for the sororitas, and with each one, I whispered a prayer for accuracy. I gave my midday meal to a pilgrim from a feral world, an act of charity that was noted by a redemptionist priest who nodded his approval. I have done everything right. I have followed every rule, and yet I am terrified. My neighbor, Felon, was taken yesterday. His son was heard humming a tune that was not a recognized hymn. They were all taken. His wife, his daughter, all of them. Burned in the Plaza of Repentance as examples of familial taint. I am so tired of being afraid. I fear sleep, for my dreams are my own. I fear my children, for their innocence may betray them. I fear my own thoughts. Is this what it is to be holy? To be so full of fear that there is no room for anything else? Emperor, save me from my salvation. This is the psychological landscape of a shrine world. It is a society that has cannibalized itself in the name of faith. There is no art, no science, no philosophy, only dogma. There is no compassion, only judgment. There is no love, only a terrified, obsessive devotion to a distant, silent God. The alien and the mutant are not the only enemies. The greatest enemy is the self, the stray thought, the unspoken doubt, the private moment of despair. On a shrine world, the citizen learns that the most dangerous place in the universe is not the dark void between the stars, but the inner space of their own mind. Their soul is not their own. It is the property of the state, and it is subject to inspection and purification at any time, without warning. The peace they are offered is the peace of utter conformity, a spiritual and intellectual death that is, in many ways, more complete than any physical execution. In the grand, horrifying tapestry of the Imperium, the individual threads of a citizen's life are woven together by institutions of control, vast, impersonal systems that transcend planetary boundaries and ensure that no soul, from the highest noble to the lowest sump dweller, can ever truly escape the machine. The first and most pervasive of these is the Adeptus Ministorum, known more commonly as the Ecclesiarchy. This is the Church of the God Emperor, and its power is absolute. The Ecclesiarchy's genius lies in its co-opting of the human need for faith. It has taken the fear, the desperation, and the longing for meaning that defines life in a hostile galaxy, and it has weaponized it. The Imperial Creed is not a message of hope. It is a tool of subjugation. It teaches that suffering is piety, that obedience is the highest virtue, and that death in service is the only path to salvation. This doctrine is hammered into the mind of every citizen from birth through catechisms, sermons, and public rituals that are designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. The great cathedrals that dominate the skylines of imperial worlds are not just places of worship, they are fortresses of the mind. Their soaring vaults and stained glass windows depicting wrathful saints are designed to make the individual feel small, insignificant, and utterly dependent on the authority of the priests. The priests themselves, the confessors and cardinals, wield the power of life and death. They are the arbiters of sin and righteousness. They can condemn a man to a penal legion for a minor transgression or elevate him to a living saint for a display of fanatical devotion. They control the narrative of the Imperium, rewriting history and suppressing any knowledge that contradicts their dogma. For the average citizen, the ecclesiarchy is an ever-present, watchful eye. Every action is scrutinized for signs of deviancy. A confession is not a moment of spiritual relief, but an interrogation, a chance for the church to root out dissent before it can fester. To question the word of a priest is to question the emperor himself, an act of blasphemy punishable by the most agonizing death imaginable. But the control is deeper than just fear. The ecclesiarchy offers the only source of hope in a hopeless world. The promise of the emperor's protection, the idea that their suffering has a divine purpose, is a powerful psychological balm. It is this manufactured hope that keeps the trillions toiling, that stops them from succumbing to utter despair and rising up against their masters. It is a brilliant, insidious form of control. To sell a man the poison and also be the sole purveyor of the antidote. They are trapped in a cycle of manufactured sin and conditional redemption, a cycle that ensures their eternal servitude. A quote attributed to the infamous Cardinal Bucarus, a man who ruled an entire sector as his personal fiefdom, perfectly encapsulates this philosophy. They crave certainty. They cry out for a firm hand to guide them through the darkness. We shall give them that hand. We shall forge for them a cage of faith, and they will thank us for it. They will line up to kiss the bars of their own prison, for we will have convinced them that outside lies only damnation. Freedom is a burden the common man is not strong enough to bear. We bear it for them, and in return, they give us their obedience, their lives, their very souls. It is a most equitable transaction. The ecclesiarchy ensures that the spirit of the citizen is as shackled as their body. They are born into a system that has already decided what they will believe, how they will feel, and what they will die for. Their faith is not a choice. It is a pre-written script, and their only role is to perform it until their final, exhausted breath. If the ecclesiarchy is the master of the citizen's soul, then the adeptus administratum is the master of their physical existence. It is the vast, labyrinthine bureaucracy that, in theory, manages the Imperium. In practice, it is a monstrous, self-perpetuating entity that grinds down worlds and populations through the sheer, soul-crushing weight of its own inefficiency and indifference. For the planetary citizen, the administratum is a faceless, unknowable god, whose decrees descend from on high, altering the course of their lives without reason or recourse. The citizen is not a name. They are a designation number. They are a data point on a census scroll, a statistic in a resource allocation report. Their entire life is quantified, recorded, and filed away in data vaults so large they cover entire continents. From the moment of birth, a file is opened. It records their genetic lineage, their assigned work unit, their productivity output, their ration allocation, and their tithe grade. This file will follow them for their entire life. A silent, unseen companion that holds more power over their fate than any personal choice they could ever make. A clerical error, a misplaced decimal point in a tithe calculation, can condemn a world to starvation. A misfiled conscription order can see a peaceful, agri-world's entire population sent to die in a war zone 1,000 light-years away. There is no appeal. To question the administratum is to attempt to argue with a mountain. You cannot reason with it. You cannot bribe it. You can only be crushed by it. We see its influence in every aspect of a citizen's life. The nutrient paste they eat is formulated and distributed according to administratum efficiency protocols. The hab block they live in was designed by an architect initiate on a distant world, who was tasked with maximizing population density while minimizing material cost. The very air they breathe is recycled according to standards set by a subcommittee on atmospheric resource management. Every single aspect of their existence has been optimized for the benefit of the Imperium, with human well-being not even registering as a variable in the equation. A chilling example of this bureaucratic horror can be found in the history of the Hive world of Thoth, A census error, committed centuries earlier and endlessly duplicated by generations of scribes, had classified the planet's population as being 10 times smaller than it actually was. As a result, the food shipments allocated to Thoth were catastrophically insufficient. For 500 years, the people of Thoth starved. They devolved into a society of institutionalized cannibalism, their culture warped by a constant, gnawing hunger. They did not know why they were starving. They blamed themselves, believing they had angered the emperor, that their suffering was a punishment for some unknown sin. They prayed, they fasted, they performed acts of extreme penance, all in an attempt to appease a god who was not angry, merely misinformed by his own bureaucracy. The error was only discovered when a junior scribe, tasked with reconciling Munitorum supply logs, noticed a discrepancy. He was not praised for his discovery. He was executed for daring to question a 500-year-old document. The original census data was declared correct by a higher authority, as admitting the error would have required more paperwork than simply allowing the planet to continue its slow, agonizing death. An intercepted astropathic message from a high-level administrator regarding the Thoth situation reveals the cold logic at play. The Thoth anomaly is a non-issue. To correct the census data would create a cascade of logistical recalculations across the entire sector, disrupting the flow of materiel to the Cadian Gate. The current situation, while unfortunate for the populace, is stable and requires no intervention. The planet continues to meet its industrial tithe, which is the only metric of consequence. Let them eat their dead. It is, in its own way, a model of resourcefulness. The administratum is a monument to the idea that the greatest cruelties are often not born of malice, but of simple, profound indifference. It is a system so vast and so complex that it has become divorced from the humanity it is meant to serve. For the citizen, it is a constant, oppressive presence. They are haunted by forms they must fill, by quotas they must meet, by regulations they cannot comprehend. They are trapped in a prison of paperwork, their lives dictated by the stroke of a scribe's quill on a world they've never heard of. It is a slow, grinding horror, a death by 1,000 forms. And it is, perhaps, the most quintessentially imperial way for a life to be extinguished. Beyond the overt control of the church and the suffocating embrace of the bureaucracy, there lies a deeper, more primal layer of authority, the Adeptus Arbites. They are the enforcers of the Lex Imperialis, the universal law of the Imperium. They are not a police force in any sense we would understand. They do not protect the citizens. They do not solve crimes for the benefit of the community. Their sole, unwavering purpose is to protect the stability of imperial rule. They are the guardians of the status quo, the iron fist that descends upon any hint of sedition, rebellion, or organized dissent. For the common citizen, the Arbites are a terrifying and ever-present threat. Their precinct fortresses are brutalist, intimidating structures that loom over the urban landscape, their walls devoid of windows, their gates manned by imposing figures clad in black carapace armor. The sight of an Arbite's patrol, with their signature shock mauls and executioner shotguns, is enough to quell any unrest. They do not walk a beat. They march, their heavy boots striking the ground in a rhythmic, intimidating cadence that announces the arrival of absolute authority. Their justice is swift, brutal, and public. There are no trials in the traditional sense, no juries of one's peers. An Arbite's judge has the power to investigate, sentence, and execute a suspect on the spot. A crowd that gathers to protest a cut in rations is not a group of desperate citizens. It is an illegal gathering, an incipient riot to be dispersed with extreme prejudice. A worker who organizes a strike for better conditions is not a labor leader. He is a seditionist, guilty of disrupting the emperor's sacred industry, and his public execution will serve as a stark reminder to others of the cost of disobedience. The Arbites operate on a principle of overwhelming force and collective punishment. If a crime is committed against an imperial official in a certain hab block, the Arbites will not conduct a careful investigation. They will seal the entire block, cutting off food and water, and will not relent until the perpetrator is handed over by the terrified populace. If the culprit is not found, they may simply declare the entire block guilty of collaboration and purge it with fire. An Arbite's patrol log, recovered from the ruins of Hive Primus on Necromunda, gives a chilling glimpse into their mindset. The entry is by a proctor sergeant named Kalen, 1,400 hours. Responded to reports of unsanctioned proselytizing in Hab Sector Gamma 9. Suspect was distributing pamphlets claiming the Emperor's Tarot was a tool of control, a clear case of seditious heresy. The crowd became hostile upon our arrival, throwing refuse and chanting obscenities. I authorized the use of suppression tactics. We broke the crowd with gas grenades and shock mauls. 1,430 hours. The primary suspect was apprehended. Under interrogation, level 3. Per protocol, he implicated 12 others. 1,500 hours. All 13 suspects were found guilty of heresy and sedition. Sentence: public execution. We carried out the sentence in the sector plaza. The rest of the populace was compliant. 1,600 hours. Return to the precinct. The sector is secure. The Emperor's law is absolute. There is no innocence, only degrees of guilt. This last line, "There is no innocence, only degrees of guilt," is the unofficial motto of the Arbites, and it perfectly encapsulates their worldview. In their eyes, the teeming masses of humanity are a potential threat, a sea of latent criminality and heresy that must be kept in check through constant pressure and fear. They do not see the people they rule over. They see only the potential for disorder. They are the ultimate expression of the Imperium's paranoia. They are the wall between the fragile order of imperial rule and the chaos of human nature. For the planetary citizen, this means that the law is not a shield to protect them, but a sword hanging constantly over their head. It is arbitrary, brutal, and inescapable. They learn to keep their heads down, to not speak out, to not draw attention to themselves. They learn that justice is a luxury they cannot afford, and that survival depends on being invisible to the cold, unforgiving eyes of the law. The Arbites, the Ecclesiarchy, and the Administratum form an unholy trinity of control, a cage of faith, bureaucracy, and fear that ensnares every imperial citizen. It is a system so complete, so total, that it leaves no room for freedom of thought, action, or spirit. And yet, there is a shadow that falls even over the Arbites. There is a fear that can make even the most hardened confessor or the most powerful planetary governor tremble. It is a name that is spoken only in terrified whispers, for to even utter it is to invite scrutiny from which few return. This is the holy orders of the Emperor's Inquisition. If the Arbites are the fist of the Imperium, the Inquisition is its soul, a dark, paranoid, and utterly ruthless organ of secret police and witch hunters. Their authority is absolute and transcends all other imperial institutions. An inquisitor can requisition any resource, command any army, and condemn any individual, up to and including a High Lord of Terra, if they believe it is necessary to protect the Imperium from the threats that lurk within. For the average citizen, the Inquisition is not a physical presence, but a terrifying myth, a ghost story used to frighten children and keep adults in line. They are the men in black who come in the night, the unseen watchers, the ones who deal with the horrors that the common man is not meant to know exist: demonic possession, forbidden sorcery, alien infiltration, and insidious mutant cults. The citizens' interaction with the Inquisition is almost always their last. The Inquisition does not arrest, it purges. It does not investigate, it interrogates. And its methods of interrogation are the stuff of nightmares, employing arcane technology and psychic intrusion to rip secrets from a mind, leaving it a shattered, drooling wreck. The true horror of the Inquisition, from the citizen's perspective, is its arbitrary and all-encompassing nature. Anyone can be an agent of the Inquisition. The quiet man who runs the corner store, the scribe in the administratum office, the preacher who delivers sermons on the street, any of them could be an informant, their eyes and ears open for the slightest hint of heresy. This breeds a profound and corrosive paranoia that seeps into the very fabric of society. Neighbors inform on neighbors to settle old grudges. Children are encouraged to report their own parents for impure thoughts, a careless word, a strange dream shared with a friend. The ownership of a proscribed book, any of these, can be enough to trigger an inquisitorial investigation. Once the Inquisition's gaze falls upon you, you are already guilty. The investigation is merely a formality to uncover the extent of your heresy and to identify your co-conspirators. We have a fragment of a testimony, psychically extracted from a citizen of the scholar's world of Proxima Centauri, just before his purification. They asked me about the book. It was an old thing, a history of pre-imperial Terra. I found it in the archives. It spoke of a time when humanity governed itself, of science without dogma, of freedom. I read it. I did not share it. I just read it. But the Inquisitor, her eyes were like cold fire. She said the knowledge was a taint. She said that to know of a time before the Emperor's grace was to invite doubt, and doubt is the first step to damnation. She showed me images in my own mind, images of what my curiosity could lead to. Worlds consumed by fire, demons wearing the faces of my children. She said I was a door, and that I had opened it a crack, and that for the good of humanity, the door, and the room, and the entire house had to be burned to the ground. I understand now. My crime was not reading the book. My crime was thinking a thought that was not given to me. My crime was being an individual. The Inquisition is the immune system of the Imperium, and it sees individuality as a disease. Its greatest weapon is not the bolt gun or the power sword, but fear. The fear of the unknown, the fear of your own neighbor, the fear of your own mind. They will burn a world to save a sector. They will exterminate 1 billion souls to prevent a single chaos cult from taking root. This is the doctrine of exterminatus, the final sanction, where an inquisitor can order a planet's entire biosphere to be destroyed by cyclonic torpedoes, virus bombs, and atmospheric incinerators. For the planetary citizen, this means that the world they live on, the very ground beneath their feet, is not guaranteed. At any moment, for reasons they will never know, their sky could turn to fire, and their existence could be erased from history, their planet reduced to a barren, lifeless rock, their memory purged from all imperial records. This is the ultimate expression of the citizen's value in the 41st millennium. They are utterly, terrifyingly expendable. Their life, their world, their entire civilization is a resource that can and will be sacrificed without a moment's hesitation for the perceived greater good of the Imperium. They are living on borrowed time, under a suspended sentence, and they will never know when the executioner might finally arrive. The life of an imperial citizen is defined by one overarching, inescapable reality: the tithe. The great tithe, the tithe imperialis, is the lifeblood of the Imperium, the endless river of resources that flows from the million worlds of mankind to the hungry heart of the war machine. It is a concept so vast, so fundamental, that it transcends mere taxation. It is an act of perpetual, compulsory sacrifice. Every world in the Imperium is assessed a tithe grade, a measure of its ability to contribute. This tithe can take many forms. For an agri-world, it is a staggering percentage of its food production. For a forge world, it is a quota of weapons, tanks, and starships. For a mining world, it is tons of raw ore. But the most common and most chilling form of tithe is the tithe of flesh. Worlds are required to provide men and women for the institutions of the Imperium. They must provide recruits for the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard. These are the infamous foundings, where entire generations of a planet's youth are harvested, loaded onto colossal transport ships, and sent off to fight and die on distant alien battlefields. For the citizen, the arrival of the black ships of the Adeptus Terra is a time of dread. Families are torn apart. Communities are decimated. The strongest, the bravest, the most hopeful are taken away, leaving the old, the infirm, and the very young behind. It is a generational bloodletting, ensuring that a planet's population remains compliant and is never strong enough to consider rebellion. A less common, but far more terrifying, tithe is that of the psychers. Psychers are individuals born with the ability to touch the warp, the chaotic, immaterial dimension that exists parallel to our own. In any other society, they might be seen as gifted. In the Imperium, they are seen as ticking time bombs, potential gateways for demonic incursion. The citizen is taught to fear them, to hate them, to report any sign of latent psychic ability to the authorities. A child who can read minds, who can move objects with a thought, is not a miracle. It is a curse. They are taken from their families by the same black ships, their faces hidden behind psionic dampening hoods, their fate a terrifying mystery. The citizens are told that these psychers are taken to Terra to be trained to serve the Emperor. The truth is far more gruesome. The vast majority are deemed too weak or unstable to control their powers. They are taken to the Golden Throne, the arcane life support machine that sustains the dying body of the Emperor of mankind. There, their souls are consumed, their life force drained away to feed the insatiable psychic appetite of the master of mankind. They are living batteries, sacrificed by the thousand every single day. Their silent screams of psychic agony, a constant, unheard chorus that underpins the very existence of the Imperium. 1,000 souls a day, just to keep the light of the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that allows for interstellar travel, burning. The citizen does not know this. They only know the fear. They know that to be different is to be doomed. They know that the black ships come, and they take, and they do not give back. This constant draining tithe is the ultimate expression of the citizen's role. They are not individuals with rights or freedoms. They are a resource. They are a crop to be harvested. Their value is not in their life, but in their death. Their flesh and blood fuels the armies. Their food fuels the workers. Their faith fuels the priests. And for a select, unlucky few, their very souls fuel the emperor. A quote from the writings of an imperial lord of the administratum, Pontius Glaw, illustrates this with chilling clarity. Mankind is a natural resource. Like any resource, it must be managed, harvested, and expended efficiently. The individual soul is a fleeting, transient thing. It has no intrinsic value. Its only worth is in its utility to the Imperium as a whole. 10 billion souls may be expended to secure a star system. This is not a tragedy. It is a sound investment. We are not shepherding a flock. We are managing a biomass. And in the grand calculus of the galaxy, the numbers must always add up in our favor. The citizen's life is therefore a long, slow payment of a debt they never incurred. They pay with their labor, their children, their freedom, and their lives. They pay for the sin of being born human in a galaxy that has no place for humanity, and the tithe is never ending. The debt can never be fully repaid. The great machine must always be fed. Given this relentless catalog of horrors, the oppressive labor, the institutionalized control, the constant threat of violence from both within and without, one might ask, why is there not constant, galaxy-spanning rebellion? Why do the trillions not rise up and cast off their chains? The answer is as complex as it is tragic. The Imperium has perfected the art of managing despair. Firstly, there is the simple, brutal fact of isolation. The galaxy is vast, and the Imperium's control of interstellar travel is absolute. The average citizen knows nothing of the universe beyond their own planet, or even their own Hive city. They have no way of knowing that a billion other souls on a different world are suffering in the exact same way they are. Revolutions are born of shared ideas, of communication, of solidarity. The Imperium ensures that its worlds are islands, each trapped in its own unique version of hell, unable to communicate or coordinate with any other. News from the outside world is heavily censored, filtered through the ecclesiarchy and the administratum, reduced to a stream of propaganda about glorious victories and the ever-present threat of the alien. The citizen is kept in a state of perpetual ignorance and fear, believing their world is the only bastion of light in an ocean of darkness. Secondly, there is the masterful application of hope as a tool of control. It is a carefully rationed, highly addictive drug. The ecclesiarchy provides the grand, overarching hope of salvation in the next life, a promise that all this suffering will be rewarded after death. But there are smaller, more immediate hopes dangled before the citizen as well. The chance to be promoted from the factory floor to a minor supervisory role, the opportunity to join the Imperial Guard and escape the Hive. The dream of winning the Hive lottery, a rigged game that offers a minuscule chance of a better life, but which keeps millions invested in the system. These small, often illusory, paths of advancement create a sense of competition rather than solidarity. The citizen is encouraged to see their fellow worker not as a comrade, but as a rival for the few crumbs that fall from the master's table. This internal division is a powerful barrier to collective action. We have a recovered transcript from an unsanctioned workers' meeting in the underhive of Hive Sibelius, intercepted by an Arbeits listening post. The speaker, a woman named Anya, tries to rally her fellows. They want us to fight each other. They want you to curse the man next to you for getting an extra ration bar, to envy the woman whose HAB unit has a working water reclamator. They want us to stay in our little cages, fighting over the scraps, so we never look up and see who holds the key to the whole damned prison. We are all in this together. Our enemy is not the ganger from the next dome, or the mutant in the sump. Our enemy lives in the spires, in palaces of gold, and looks down on us like we're insects. The meeting was raided minutes later. Anya and the other organizers were publicly executed. The message was clear. Solidarity is sedition. But perhaps the most powerful reason for the lack of rebellion is the simple, crushing absence of an alternative. The citizen is taught from birth that the Imperium, for all its cruelty, is the only thing standing between humanity and total extinction. They are shown picked captures of worlds devoured by tyrannids, of populations enslaved by the Drukhari, of the gibbering, insane horrors wrought by chaos. The propaganda is relentless and effective. Life in the Imperium may be a living hell, but the alternative is presented as something far, far worse. An eternity of torment, slavery, or annihilation. The choice they are given is not between a good life and a bad life, but between a bad life and no life at all. It is a form of galactic blackmail. The Imperium is the abusive parent who says, "I may beat you, but I do it to protect you from the monsters outside." And in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the terrifying truth is that the monsters are real. The threats are not imaginary. This creates a state of cognitive dissonance in the mind of the citizen. They hate their chains, but they fear what will happen if those chains are broken. And so they toil, they endure, they suffer. They dream of a better world, but they do not dare to build it, for fear that in tearing down their prison, they might bring the whole sky crashing down upon their heads. What of the human spirit in such a system? Can beauty, love, or art exist in a world designed to crush them? The answer is a quiet, desperate, and often tragic yes. Humanity is resilient. Even in the deepest, darkest pits of the Imperium, small sparks of light persist, flickering defiantly against an overwhelming darkness. These are not grand gestures of rebellion, but small, personal acts of defiance that reaffirm the humanity of those who perform them. In the underhive, a ganger might risk their life to share a scavenged piece of fruit with a child. In the manufactorum, workers might develop a secret code of taps and whistles, a language of their own to share jokes and warnings, a small pocket of community carved out of the deafening noise of the machine. On an agri-world, a young couple might steal a moment away from the fields to watch the twin moons rise, a shared secret of beauty in a life of unending labor. Art, too, persists in mutated, clandestine forms. On the walls of forgotten transit tunnels, one might find elaborate murals, painted with scavenged pigments, depicting not the stern-faced saints of the Imperium, but the myths and legends of the Underhive. In the Hab blocks, people might gather to listen to a void singer, a storyteller who has pieced together fragments of forgotten history and myth, weaving tales of a time before the endless dark. These stories are dangerous, heretical, and they are treasured beyond measure. A recovered artifact, a small, crudely carved wooden bird, was found clutched in the hand of a dead Factorum worker on Iax. It served no purpose. It had no function. It was, in the eyes of the Imperium, a waste of time and material. But to the person who carved it, it was a memory of a sky they had never seen, a symbol of a freedom they had never known. It was an act of pure, pointless, beautiful creation in a universe that only values destruction and utility. This is an act of rebellion more profound than any riot. Love, too, endures, though it is a fragile and dangerous thing. In a society that sees people as breeding stock or production units, to form a genuine emotional bond is an act of defiance. To love someone is to acknowledge their unique, irreplaceable value, a concept that is antithetical to the imperial worldview. Families are often broken apart by the tithes, by workplace accidents, by the arbitrary cruelty of the authorities. And yet, people continue to form them. They protect their children. They care for their elders. They mourn their dead, all in secret, all in the quiet corners of their lives, away from the watchful eyes of the state. These acts are the silent, unwritten history of the Imperium. They are the testament of the human soul's refusal to be extinguished. But this resilience comes at a terrible cost. Every act of defiance, no matter how small, carries the risk of death. The storyteller is an unregistered psyker waiting to be discovered. The artist is a heretic spreading dissent. The lovers are creating an unsanctioned attachment that could compromise their loyalty to the state. The Imperium is a jealous god, and it tolerates no other allegiances. A quote from an ecclesiarchal text, the Epistles of St. Drusus, speaks to this. Beware the solace of the mundane. Beware the love of a spouse, for it can eclipse the love of the emperor. Beware the beauty of a song, for its melody can drown out the hymns of the faithful. There is no room for small loyalties in a heart that must be entirely given over to the defense of mankind. All that is personal must be sacrificed. All that is beautiful must be consecrated to his name, or it must be destroyed. And so, the small sparks of humanity are constantly being stamped out. The artists are burned. The storytellers are silenced. The lovers are separated. For every act of quiet defiance, the Imperium responds with overwhelming force. It cannot tolerate even the smallest crack in its monolithic facade of control. And so the life of the citizen becomes a secret war, a daily struggle to preserve some small, private part of themselves against a system that seeks to own them completely, body and soul. The tragedy is that it is a war they can never truly win. Let us explore the end of a citizen's life. For the vast majority, death is not a peaceful release, but a final, ignominious service to the state. In a society that wastes nothing, the very corpse of a citizen is a resource to be exploited. We have spoken of corpse starch, the recycled protein paste that forms the staple diet on most hive worlds. This is the most common fate. Upon death, a worker's body is collected by the Corpse Guild, a semi-sanctioned organization that works in grim concert with the planet's authorities. The body is stripped of any useful bionics, which are then refurbished and implanted into other, still living workers. The remaining organic matter is taken to vast processing plants, rendered down in chemical vats, and extruded as the bland, gray nutrient that will feed the next generation. A citizen is thus consumed by the very system they served in life. It is a closed, horrifyingly efficient loop of birth, labor, death, and consumption. There is no ceremony, no grave, no remembrance. A name is struck from a work roster, a housing unit is reassigned, and the great machine grinds on, barely noticing the absence of a single, broken cog. For those who die in a manner that leaves their body intact, other fates await. The skull might be claimed by the ecclesiarchy, polished, and used as a decorative element in a cathedral, a single, anonymous face in a sea of bone, a testament to the numberless martyrs of the faith. Other body parts might be claimed by the adeptus mechanicus, repurposed for the creation of servitors or other biomechanical constructs. A strong spine might be used as the central column for a combat drone. A pair of eyes might be integrated into a servo skull, a floating, reanimated cranium that serves as a scribe or a scanner. To be turned into a servo skull is seen by some as an honor, a chance to continue serving the emperor even after death. The reality is a grotesque parody of immortality, the last vestiges of a human being turned into a floating, buzzing tool, its consciousness long since scoured from its own bones. This commodification of the dead has a profound psychological effect on the living. It strips death of its dignity, its meaning, and its finality. The dead are not at rest. They are simply on a different stage of their service. This fosters a deep-seated nihilism, a sense that life and death are part of the same meaningless, mechanical process. An old Hive saying captures this sentiment perfectly. Don't mourn the dead. The lucky ones are in the pipes. The unlucky ones are still walking around. But there is a final, spiritual horror that awaits the citizen at the moment of their death. The imperial creed teaches that the faithful soul will join the emperor in the golden light, becoming a guardian and a watcher over humanity. But the truth of the galaxy is far more complex and terrifying. The warp, the immaterial realm that underlies reality, is not a peaceful heaven. It is a roiling, chaotic ocean of raw emotion, inhabited by predatory, demonic entities that are drawn to souls like sharks to blood. For millennia, the shamans of ancient humanity could reincarnate, their souls slipping back into new bodies. But now, the warp is a storm. The souls of the dead are cast into this storm, where they are often torn apart and consumed by the horrors that dwell there. The Emperor, in his current state on the Golden Throne, is a psychic beacon, the Astronomicon, but he is also a psychic predator. It is whispered by heretics and mystics that he is a dying god, and his hunger is so great that he draws the souls of the faithful to himself, consuming them to sustain his own fading light. The citizen's soul is not saved. It is used as fuel. This is the ultimate secret, the most profound heresy. The promise of salvation is a lie, and the final act of faith, the commending of one's soul to the emperor, is an act of self-immolation. Their entire life of suffering and sacrifice is rewarded not with paradise, but with oblivion, their spiritual essence burned away to provide a flicker of light for a dying, devouring God. Whether their body is rendered into food or their soul is rendered into fuel, the citizen's fate is the same. They are a resource. From their first breath to their final, psychic scream, they are born to be used, and in death, they are used up completely. The physical and spiritual horrors of a citizen's life are compounded by the constant, grinding pressure of their environment. The worlds of the Imperium are not merely settings. They are active antagonists, hostile and predatory landscapes that seek to destroy the body and break the mind. Imagine the Hive City not as a metropolis, but as a cancer. A vertical tumor of metal and rockcrete that has grown over millennia, consuming the planet's surface, blotting out the sun, and poisoning the very air. The lower you descend, the older and more unstable the structures become. Entire sections can collapse without warning, plunging thousands of hab blocks into the abyss in an event grimly known as a hive quake. The air itself is a slow poison, a recycled chemical soup that causes respiratory illnesses, mutations, and a litany of cancers. The water is drawn from subterranean reservoirs, filtered through systems that are thousands of years old and barely functional, often carrying strange diseases and industrial contaminants. Noise pollution is a constant torment, a never-ending symphony of industrial machinery, klaxons, and the distant screams of the unfortunate, leading to sensory exhaustion and psychological breakdown. The sheer, overwhelming scale of the hive is designed to induce a sense of agoraphobia and insignificance. To look up from the underhive is to see only a latticework of pipes and gantries, with the sky being the dimly lit floor of the level above you. To look down is to see nothing but a bottomless, man-made chasm. The citizen is a rat in a maze of incomprehensible size, with no knowledge of its layout and no hope of escape. The flora and fauna that have adapted to this artificial ecosystem are as monstrous as the city itself. Giant, chitinous insects infest the ventilation shafts. Predatory, pale-skinned creatures hunt in the shadows of the sump. Slimes and fungi, mutated by chemical waste, grow on every surface, many of them toxic or carnivorous. To leave the relative safety of a hab block is to enter a hostile wilderness, where you are no longer at the top of the food chain. This environmental hostility is not limited to hive worlds. On a forge world, the very ground can be lethally radioactive in places. Magnetic storms generated by colossal machinery can erase a person's memory or induce seizures. On an agri-world, the native life that survived the terraforming process can be a constant threat. Flying predators might snatch workers from the fields, and burrowing creatures might cause entire sections of land to collapse into sinkholes. Even the weather is an enemy. On many worlds, the terraforming process is incomplete or decaying, leading to extreme and unpredictable weather patterns. Acid rain that can strip flesh from bone, flash floods of industrial slurry, hurricane-force winds that can tear buildings from their foundations. These are not rare occurrences, but regular features of life. A recovered journal entry from a prospector on the mining world of Calthor illustrates this. The sky turned green today. The old-timers call it bile fall. We sealed the habdome, but the rain still finds a way in. It eats through the seals, hisses on the floor plates, smells like burning souls. Jorik went out to check the atmospheric condensers. He wasn't wearing a fully sealed suit. We heard him screaming for a minute. Then we didn't. When the rain stopped, we went out to look for him. All we found was his suit, mostly dissolved, and a bubbling puddle on the ground. The foreman just marked him down as an equipment loss. The suit was expensive. The universe of the 41st millennium is actively, malevolently hostile to human life. The planets themselves seem to be trying to shrug off the infestation of humanity. For the citizen, this means there is no safety, no sanctuary. Their home is a death trap. The air they breathe is poison. The ground they walk on is unstable. The natural world is a bestiary of horrors. Their existence is a constant battle against an environment that is trying to kill them, a battle that, in the end, every single citizen is destined to lose. Amidst the teeming, anonymous masses of humanity, there are those who are marked as different, those who are born other. These are the mutants and the abhumans. In the eyes of the ecclesiarchy and the Imperium at large, the human form is sacred, a holy vessel crafted by the Emperor. Any deviation from this divine template is a sign of corruption, a physical manifestation of spiritual taint. The fate of these individuals is one of the most tragic aspects of a citizen's life. Mutation can arise from any number of sources: exposure to industrial toxins, radiation from a weak spot in a planet's magnetic field, the random, chaotic influence of the warp. The changes can be minor and unusual skin color, an extra finger, eyes that are solid black. Or they can be extreme vestigial wings, scaled skin, distorted, inhuman features. Regardless of the severity, the reaction is the same: fear, hatred, and violent persecution. A child born with a mutation is often killed at birth by its own parents. A desperate act of mercy to save it from a worse fate and to protect the family from accusations of harboring a deviant. If the mutation manifests later in life, the individual is cast out. They are driven from their community, hunted by redemptionist cults who seek to purify the human gene pool with fire, and forced to flee into the most dangerous and lawless parts of society, such as the underhive or the toxic wastelands outside the cities. Here, they form their own wretched communities, living in fear and squalor, hated and despised by the pure humans they once lived among. They are the ultimate scapegoats. If a plague breaks out, it is the mutant's fault. If a machine breaks down, it is the result of a mutant's curse. They are a tangible focus for the fear and hatred that permeate imperial society. Then there are the abhumans, entire subspecies of humanity that have, over millennia of isolation on different worlds, evolved or been genetically engineered to the point where they are recognizably different from the human baseline. Some, like the Ogryn's giant, immensely strong but simple-minded brutes, and the rattling small, hobbit-like snipers and scavengers have been deemed stable and useful enough to be granted sanction by the Imperium. They are permitted to exist, but only in a state of servitude, primarily as auxiliary troops in the Imperial Guard. Even these sanctioned abhumans are treated with contempt and suspicion. They are seen as lesser beings, as living tools, not as true citizens. An Ogryn might be praised for its loyalty and strength on the battlefield, but it would never be allowed to walk freely in the upper levels of a Hive city. They are segregated, ghettoized, and treated as a necessary but distasteful part of the Imperial war machine. A letter from an Imperial Guard lieutenant to his father on an orbital station reveals the common attitude. "Father, you asked about the new auxiliaries attached to my platoon. They are Ogryns, from a penal world in the Segmentum Pacificus. They are effective. In the last engagement, one of them, who the men have nicknamed Tiny, single-handedly held a breach in our trench line, using a torn-off piece of bulkhead as a club. He saved all our lives. But they are not men. They have the minds of children. They cannot operate complex equipment. They cannot read, and they must be constantly supervised. They are loyal, like a dog is loyal. Useful, yes, but they are not us." After the battle, I watched Tiny trying to put his comrades' intestines back inside his ruptured belly, a look of profound, bovine confusion on his face. In that moment, I felt not camaraderie, but a deep, unsettling pity. They are a tragic, dead-end branch of our species, and we are right to use them as the blunt instruments they are. For the mutant and the abhuman, there is no hope of acceptance. They are a living embodiment of the Imperium's deepest fears: the fear of change, the fear of corruption, the fear of the alien within. Their very existence is a crime, and their life is a constant struggle for survival in a galaxy that has judged them and found them wanting. They are the lowest of the low, the ultimate pariahs in a society built on a foundation of paranoia and hate. The psychological landscape of the Imperial citizen is a wasteland of carefully cultivated fear and ignorance. The most powerful tool of control is not the shock maul or the lasgun, but the manipulation of information. Knowledge, in the Imperium, is not power. It is a dangerous contagion, a heresy waiting to happen. The citizen is fed a carefully curated diet of information, a stream of propaganda designed to foster obedience, xenophobia, and unquestioning faith. They are told that the Imperium is the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known, that the Emperor is a benevolent, all-powerful god, and that all aliens are monstrous, soul-devouring fiends who must be exterminated without mercy. They are never told of the Imperium's defeats, only its glorious victories. They are never told of the nuances of Xeno's cultures. They are shown only the most terrifying and aggressive aspects of each species. They are taught a history that is a myth, a simplified, heroic narrative that erases all the complexities, the moral ambiguities, and the outright atrocities of the past. The Horus Heresy, the great civil war that nearly destroyed the Imperium 10,000 years ago, is not taught as a complex tragedy of brother fighting brother, but as a simple story of heroic loyalists versus cartoonishly evil traitors. The so-called Dark Age of Technology, the era of humanity's greatest scientific achievement before the rise of the Imperium, is spoken of only as a time of hubris and sin, a cautionary tale against the dangers of unchecked curiosity and reliance on thinking machines. Any text, any artifact, any piece of art that contradicts this official narrative is ruthlessly suppressed. The Inquisition's Ordo Hereticus and the Ecclesiarchy's witch hunters are constantly at work, purging libraries, destroying data slates, and executing scholars who dare to delve into forbidden lore. This creates a state of enforced ignorance that is almost impossible to escape. The citizen does not know what they do not know. They have no frame of reference, no alternative perspective from which to judge their own reality. Their universe is a small, dark room, and the propaganda is the only light they have ever known. An excerpt from a proscribed text, the Apocrypha of Scaroses, written by a historian who was later declared a heretic and burned, speaks to this. They have built a prison of the mind. They have taken the vast, complex, and terrifying history of our species and have rendered it down into a children's story, a tale of good versus evil with all the difficult questions removed. They have taught us to fear our own intellect, to see curiosity as a sin. They have given us a single book, a single truth, and have told us that all other knowledge is a lie. But a lie is not the opposite of truth. The greatest enemy of truth is certainty, and they have made us all so very, very certain. We are so certain of our righteousness, so certain of our enemy's evil, that we have forgotten how to ask questions. And a humanity that cannot ask questions is a humanity that is already dead. This intellectual starvation is just as damaging as the physical malnutrition. It creates a populace that is superstitious, incurious, and easily manipulated. They are prone to fits of collective hysteria, easily whipped into a frenzy of hatred against a designated scapegoat, a mutant, a psyker, a suspected heretic. They are unable to think critically, to analyze their own situation, or to even imagine a different way of life. They are trapped not only by the physical walls of their hive cities, but by the intellectual and spiritual walls that have been built around their minds. The greatest horror for the citizen is not the alien at the gate or the daemon in the shadows. It is the simple, crushing fact that they have been robbed of the ability to even understand their own predicament. They suffer in a darkness that is not just physical, but mental, and they have been taught to praise the very masters who hold the candle and cast the shadows. What happens when the thin veneer of imperial control shatters? What is the fate of a citizen on a world that is invaded, a world that falls to the myriad enemies of mankind? The answer is a descent into a new and even more profound level of horror. Consider a world targeted by a chaos invasion. The first signs are subtle. Insidious cults spring up in the shadows, promising power, freedom, and release from the drudgery of imperial life. They whisper of gods who answer prayers, who reward their followers with pleasure and strength, not just suffering and duty. For a desperate and downtrodden populace, these are tempting promises. The cults grow, and the fabric of society begins to rot from within. Paranoia becomes rampant. Productivity falters. The authorities crack down with their usual brutality. But this time, the descent is not just political. It is spiritual, and it is fueled by powers beyond their comprehension. Then comes the invasion itself. The sky rips open, and the raw, insane energies of the warp spill forth. Reality buckles and breaks. The legions of the chaos gods, the blood-soaked berserkers of Khorne, the plague-ridden monstrosities of Nurgle, the seductive daemonettes of Slaanesh, the mutating horrors of Tzientch fall upon the planet. For the citizen, this is the apocalypse made real. The Imperial Guard may fight and die in the hundreds of thousands, but they are often just a prelude to the true nightmare. The very laws of physics unravel. A man's own shadow might rise up and strangle him. The rain might turn to blood. Whispers on the wind might drive entire hab blocks to suicidal madness or homicidal frenzy. There is no safety. There is no front line. The war is everywhere, in the streets and in the soul. Survival means pledging allegiance to one of the dark gods, an act that damns the soul for all eternity. It means participating in unspeakable rituals, in acts of cannibalism, torture, and sacrifice, all to earn the favor of a new, cruel master. A Vox transmission, a fragment from the last stand on the world of Ryza, captures the despair. Mayday, Mayday. This is the last transmission from the governor's palace. The enemy is everywhere. They are not just soldiers. The statues in the plaza. They are weeping blood, and they are walking. The dead are rising from the corpse pits. O Emperor, they are wearing the faces of our children. There is no hope. There is no unintelligible screaming, followed by a wet, tearing sound and then silence asterisk. Or consider an invasion by a tyrannid Hive fleet. This is a more direct, but no less terrifying, form of annihilation. The tyrannids are the ultimate predators. They do not want to conquer or enslave. They want to consume. The invasion is a biological storm. The skies darken with trillions of winged horrors. The ground is swarmed by waves of scythed, fanged creatures that overwhelm all defenses through sheer, unstoppable numbers. For the citizen, there is nowhere to run. Hiding in the underhive is useless. The tyrannids will burrow through the very foundations of the city. To fight is to die. To be captured is to be taken to the reclamation pools. To be thrown, still living, into vast pits of digestive acid, your biomass broken down and absorbed into the Hive fleet. The last moments of a world under tyrannid assault are a silent, psychic scream of terror that echoes in the warp, a final, collective moment of agony as every living thing, man, woman, child, animal, and plant is consumed. The planet is left a barren, airless rock, stripped clean of all life, a silent monument to a biological holocaust. For the imperial citizen, the propaganda is true in one respect. The universe is a terrifying place, but the lie is in the idea that the Imperium is their savior. For many, the fall of their world is not a change from safety to horror, but a change from one form of horror to another. They are trapped between a monstrous, oppressive order and a monstrous, devouring chaos. Their life is a choice between the slow, grinding death of the machine and the quick, screaming death in the jaws of the alien. There is no good ending. There is only the end. The concept of family, a cornerstone of human society for millennia, is a warped and fractured institution in the 41st millennium. For the citizen, the family is not a source of unconditional love and support, but another arena of pressure, duty, and potential heartbreak. On most worlds, breeding is not a personal choice, but a state-regulated necessity. The administratum sets population quotas. The ecclesiarchy preaches that it is a sacred duty to produce more soldiers and workers for the emperor. Families are encouraged to have many children, not out of love, but to replace the vast numbers lost to war, industry, and disease. However, this pressure to procreate is not matched by any form of social support. Children are another mouth to feed, another drain on meager resources. In the brutal calculus of hive life, a child is a liability until it is old enough to work. This can lead to a cold, utilitarian view of one's own offspring. Love is a luxury that many cannot afford to feel. The relationship between parent and child is often defined by a grim sense of duty. The parent's job is to keep the child alive long enough to become a productive member of society. The child's duty is to work, to contribute to the family's survival, and to care for the parents when they are too old and broken to work themselves. This dynamic is poisoned by the constant intervention of the state. The children are not truly the parents. They are the property of the Imperium. From a young age, they are subjected to the indoctrination of the Scala Progenium and the Missionaris Galaxia. They are taught that their highest loyalty is not to their family, but to the Emperor. They are encouraged to inform on their parents for any perceived heresy or lack of faith. This creates a schism of distrust at the very heart of the family unit. A father might look at his son and see not a legacy, but a potential informant. A mother might fear her daughter's innocent questions, lest they be overheard by a priest and interpreted as dissent. We have a rare, personal letter, smuggled out of a penal legion, written by a man named Lorik to his wife. Marta, if you are reading this, it means the worst has happened. It was our son, Jorik. He heard me, late one night, cursing the foreman who had docked our rations. I was tired, Marta. I was just tired. He didn't understand. He told his catechism teacher. He thought he was doing the right thing. He thought he was being a good soldier of the emperor. The priest praised him for his piety. Then the Arbites came for me. I saw the look on Jorik's face as they dragged me away. He finally understood what he had done. Do not blame him, Marta. They have poisoned our children. They have taught them that love for the emperor is a sword, and that they must use it to cut away their own kin. Please, do not let him see you cry. It will only break what little is left of his heart. Tell him his father was a hero of the Imperium. Tell him anything but the truth. The very bonds of love and kinship have been turned into weapons of control. The Imperium has inserted itself into the most intimate aspects of a citizen's life, turning the family from a sanctuary into a microcosm of the paranoid, distrustful society outside. Even the act of grieving is a privilege. Public displays of grief are often seen as a sign of weak faith, a selfish attachment to the material world. When a loved one is taken by the tithe or dies in a manufactorum, the family is expected to rejoice, to praise the emperor for accepting their sacrifice. To weep is to be selfish. To mourn is to be heretical. And so, the citizen learns to bury their love, their grief, and their attachments deep within themselves, presenting a stoic, emotionless face to the world. They learn to live a lie, even to their own children. For the truth is a luxury that has become too dangerous to afford. The concept of time itself is a form of oppression for the imperial citizen. Their lives are not their own to spend. They are a resource allocated by the state. The past is a redacted myth. The future is a grimly predictable cycle of labor and death. It is the present, the relentless, grinding now, that consumes them. On a Hive world, the passage of time is marked not by day and night, but by the wail of the work siren. The citizen's life is divided into rigid, repeating cycles: work shift, sleep shift, ration allowance. There is no concept of a weekend, of a holiday, of leisure time. All time is the emperor's time, and it must be spent productively. This relentless, monotonous rhythm is psychologically devastating. It erodes the sense of self, the feeling of personal agency. The days blur into one another, each indistinguishable from the last. The citizen becomes an automaton, moving through the preordained motions of their life without thought or reflection. The only breaks in this monotony are the holy days of the imperial creed. But these are not festivals of joy and rest. They are days of compulsory worship, of long, tedious services, of public penance, and ritualized devotion. They are not a release from the pressure of daily life, but an intensification of it, a different kind of duty, a different kind of work. The very history of the Imperium, a span of 10,000 years, is a weight that crushes the present. The citizen is constantly reminded of the ancient glories of the past, of the great saints and heroes, and of their own inadequacy in comparison. They live in the decaying ruins of a greater age. The technology they use is a pale imitation of what came before, maintained by rote and ritual, not by understanding. The city they inhabit is a relic, its foundations laid by men who were like gods. This fosters a sense of profound cultural stagnation and fatalism. There is no belief in progress, no hope that the future might be better than the present. The golden age is in the distant past, and the future promises only a slow, inexorable decline into darkness. The best that can be hoped for is to maintain the status quo, to hold the line against the encroaching night for one more day. A scribe's notation, found in the margins of a manufactorum production log, captures this temporal despair. Cycle 9,871 of my service. The great piston, designated Hydra's breath, has been pounding for 3,000 years. My grandfather serviced it, his grandfather before him. And one day, my grandson will take my place. We do not know how it works. We only know the rituals to keep it working. The litany of percussive force, the canticle of lubrication. We are ghosts, haunting a machine we did not build. We are living in a museum, and the exhibits are still running. Does the machine remember a time when its masters understood its heart? Or is it, like us, just going through the motions, waiting for the day when it all finally, mercifully, grinds to a halt? This temporal prison is inescapable. The citizen is denied a meaningful past and a hopeful future. They are trapped in an eternal, grinding present, a single, unending moment of toil and service. Their lives are not a journey with a beginning, a middle, and an end. They are a loop, a closed circle of meaningless repetition, from the wail of the birth siren to the silence of the corpse vats. Time does not heal in the Imperium, it only grinds things down. The language of the Imperium, High Gothic, and its myriad Low Gothic dialects, is another tool of control. It is a language stripped of nuance and subtlety, reforged into a weapon of dogma and authority. Words that we associate with freedom, with individualism, with critical thought, have been either erased or redefined to have negative connotations. Freedom is anarchy. Curiosity is heresy. Individuality is selfishness. Peace is stagnation. The vocabulary of the average citizen is deliberately kept small, limited to the words they need to perform their duties and express their faith. This linguistic poverty is a powerful form of mind control. If you do not have the words to formulate a dissenting thought, you cannot think it. The language they are taught is filled with loaded, militaristic, and religious terminology. A factory is not a workplace. It is a holy manufactorum. A worker is not an employee. They are a servant of the emperor. A production quota is not a target. It is a sacred tithe. This language constantly reinforces the idea that every aspect of life is a holy war, a religious duty. It elevates the mundane and the oppressive into something grand and meaningful, making it harder for the citizen to question the nature of their own servitude. Rhetoric and oratory, as practiced by the ecclesiarchy, are not forms of debate or persuasion, but of hypnotic, rhythmic chanting. Sermons are not arguments. They are a barrage of powerful, emotive words and phrases, repeated over and over until they are ingrained in the consciousness of the listener. Litany, catechism, hymn. These are the primary modes of communication. The goal is not to inform, but to overwhelm, not to encourage thought, but to bypass it entirely and appeal directly to the primal emotions of fear, hatred, and devotion. An analysis of this linguistic control was penned by a rogue inquisitor, Jock Draco, in his infamous and heavily suppressed work, The Draco Sanction. They fear the word more than the sword. The sword can only kill a man. The word can kill an idea, or, worse, it can give birth to one. That is why they have built a fortress around the human lexicon. They have put guards on the gates of language. They have narrowed the paths of thought to a few, well-trodden, and easily policed avenues. They have taught humanity a language of cages, a dialect of obedience. To break free of the Imperium, one must first break free of its language. One must learn to speak in the lost tongues of doubt and inquiry. One must find the words for freedom, even if there is a universe of silence screaming for you to hold your tongue. For the citizen, this means that their very thoughts are not their own. The language they use to understand the world has been pre-digested, pre-approved, and weaponized against them. They are given a script, and they are expected to read it. To speak a different language, to use a different word, is to reveal yourself as an outsider, a heretic, a threat. The silence of the oppressed is not always born of fear. Sometimes, it is born of an inability to find the words to describe their own oppression. They are trapped in a prison of language, and they do not even know that they are holding the key, the simple, revolutionary power of the word no. The concept of truth, itself, is a casualty of the Imperium's long war. For the planetary citizen, there is no objective reality, only the imperial truth, a state-sanctioned version of events, of science, and of faith that is absolute and unquestionable. This is not just about suppressing historical facts. It is about rewriting the very laws of the universe to fit the dogma of the state. Science, as we understand it, a process of inquiry, hypothesis, and experimentation, is a heresy. It is replaced by archaeotech and the dogma of the adeptus mechanicus. The secrets of technology are not things to be discovered, but holy mysteries to be revered. To try and understand how a plasma reactor works is not science. It is blasphemy against the machine spirit. To invent a new technology is not innovation. It is a dangerous deviation from the sacred, time-tested designs. The citizen is taught that technology works not because of physics, but because of faith. A machine is coaxed into operation with the right prayer, the right application of sacred oils, the right burning of incense. If it breaks, it is because the machine's spirit is angry. This mystical, superstitious view of technology keeps the populace dependent on the tech priests and prevents them from gaining any real understanding or control over their own environment. The natural world is also seen through a lens of superstition. A comet in the sky is not a ball of ice and rock. It is an omen from the emperor. A plague is not caused by a microbe. It is a punishment for a lack of faith. This worldview is deliberately cultivated because it is easy to control. A population that believes its fate is in the hands of distant, inscrutable gods is a population that is unlikely to take its fate into its own hands. They will pray for salvation rather than fighting for it. Perhaps the most profound manipulation of truth lies in the deification of the emperor. The citizen is taught that the emperor is a benevolent, omniscient God, the loving father of all humanity. This is the central pillar of the imperial creed, but it is a lie. The historical truth, suppressed by the Inquisition and the ecclesiarchy for 10,000 years, is that the emperor himself was a staunch atheist. He was a man, albeit the most powerful psyker and brilliant scientist humanity had ever produced. His great ambition was the imperial truth, a secular, rationalist philosophy that sought to free humanity from the shackles of superstition and religion. He knew that the gods of the warp were real, and that they fed on faith, and he sought to starve them by creating a godless, scientific empire. The ultimate irony, the ultimate tragedy of the Imperium, is that in their desperation after he was mortally wounded, his followers turned him into the very thing he fought against, a god. They created a vast, galaxy-spanning religion in his name, a religion that has become the single greatest source of superstition, ignorance, and fanaticism in the galaxy. The citizen prays to a god who did not want to be a god, and in doing so, they unknowingly feed the very chaotic powers he sought to destroy. The truth has been inverted so completely that it has become its own opposite. A fragment from the Lectitio Divinitatis, the book that first proposed the emperor's divinity and is now the cornerstone of the ecclesiarchy, reveals the beginning of this great lie. He is not a man, for what man could halt a world's rotation with a glance? He is not a king, for what king could command the loyalty of 1,000,000,000 souls? He is a god, and we must give him the worship he is owed. Let us cast aside the cold, sterile logic of the past and embrace the warmth of faith, for in faith lies our only salvation. Let his name be our prayer, his word our law, his light our guide. The emperor protects. The citizen lives in a universe built on this foundational lie. Their reality is a construct, a fiction written by their masters to keep them compliant. They are actors in a play, and they do not know that the stage is a prison and the script is their sentence. The real truth of the 41st millennium is a secret so profound, so dangerous, that the Imperium would burn 1,000 worlds to keep it buried. The architecture of the Imperium is a physical manifestation of its ideology. It is a style known as Imperial Gothic, and it is a masterclass in psychological warfare. The buildings are designed to be overwhelming, to dominate the landscape and the individual, to inspire awe, terror, and a sense of profound insignificance. Imagine a cathedral or an administrative palace. It is a mountain of carved stone and plasteel, its spires reaching so high they pierce the smog-choked clouds. The walls are festooned with gargoyles depicting hideous aliens and tormented heretics. Statues of stern, unforgiving saints and wrathful angels stand guard in every alcove, their stone eyes seeming to follow the citizen as they pass. The scale is deliberately inhuman. Archways are hundreds of feet high. Doors are so massive they could admit a battle tank. The interiors are vast, cavernous spaces where the sound of a single footstep echoes into the vaulted darkness. The light is kept deliberately dim, filtering through stained glass windows that depict scenes of martyrdom and righteous slaughter, casting the interior in a bloody, twilight glow. All of this is designed to make the citizen feel like an ant in a giant's castle. It is meant to reinforce the power structure of the Imperium. The state is vast, eternal, and all-powerful, while the individual is small, transient, and worthless. This is true even of the most mundane structures. A manufactorum is not just a factory. It is a temple of industry. Its smokestacks like colossal organ pipes, its machinery adorned with skulls and purity seals. A Hab block is not just an apartment building. It is a hive, a monolithic, featureless slab of rockcrete designed to house the maximum number of people in the minimum amount of space. Its uniformity and anonymity, a constant reminder that the individual is just one of a faceless swarm. The eagle, the aquila, is everywhere. This twin-headed symbol of the Imperium is stamped, carved, and painted onto every surface, from the side of a warship to the button on a worker's tunic. It is a constant, subliminal reminder of who is in charge. It is the brand of ownership, marking every person, every place, and every object as the property of the master of mankind. A visiting rogue trader, accustomed to the more varied architecture of the galaxy's fringe, once made this observation in his private log. I have returned to an imperial world after a decade in the halo stars, and I find I can barely breathe. It is not the air, but the stone. Every building screams at you. You are small. You are guilty. You are weak. The very streets are canyons designed to make you feel trapped. There is no open space, no park, no place for quiet contemplation. There is only the altar, the forge, and the fortress. They have built a world that is a physical representation of a clenched fist. It is a marvel of engineering, and a monument to a species that has grown to hate itself. The citizen is born into this landscape of oppression. They grow up in the shadows of these monstrous structures. Their aesthetic sense, their very perception of what is normal and what is beautiful, is shaped by this architecture of fear. They learn to associate grandeur with power, darkness with holiness, and scale with authority. They are conditioned by their environment to accept their own insignificance. The city itself is a tool of indoctrination, a silent, ever-present preacher whose sermon is written in stone and steel. The concept of entertainment or leisure in the 41st millennium is a grim parody of what we might understand. For the imperial citizen, any activity that does not serve a direct, productive purpose for the state is viewed with suspicion. Leisure is seen as a gateway to idleness, and idleness is a gateway to dissent. Thus, the few forms of entertainment that are permitted are carefully controlled and designed to reinforce the state's ideology. The most common form of mass entertainment is the public spectacle. This can be a grand military parade, where legions of imperial guardsmen and colossal war machines march through the main plazas, a display of overwhelming power designed to awe the populace into submission. Or it can be a religious festival, a vast, choreographed display of piety and faith, often culminating in the public confession and execution of heretics. These executions are the ultimate spectator sport. The condemned are burned, hanged, or torn apart by gladiators in vast arenas, their deaths serving as both a gruesome entertainment and a stark warning to the cheering crowds. The citizens are encouraged to participate, to scream their hatred at the condemned, to find a cathartic release for their own fear and frustration by directing it at a sanctioned target. This is a society that has turned state-sanctioned murder into a form of public therapy. Another popular, and more brutal, form of entertainment is the arena combat. On many worlds, particularly those with a strong martial tradition, gladiatorial games are held. These can range from pit fights between cybernetically enhanced warriors to battles between condemned criminals and savage alien beasts. The crowds place bets. They cheer for their favorite fighter. They revel in the bloodshed. It is a violent, brutal escapism that channels the populace's aggressive instincts into a harmless, controlled environment. It keeps them distracted, sated with blood and spectacle, and less likely to turn their aggression against their masters. A passage from the memoirs of a retired Hive ganger from Necromunda describes the appeal. Down in the pit, there's no foreman, no priest, no arbites. There's just two gangers with chainswords, and only one's walking out. You scream till your throat is raw. You feel the blood spray on your face. For a few minutes, you're not a nobody. You're part of something real, something honest. It's life and death, right there in front of you. It makes the rest of the gray, grinding cycle almost bearable. It's the only time you ever feel anything. For the more passive, there are picked casts and vox dramas. These are the Imperium's equivalent of television and radio, broadcasting a constant stream of propaganda disguised as entertainment. The stories are always the same. Heroic guardsmen sacrificing themselves to defeat monstrous aliens. Cunning inquisitors rooting out insidious heretic cults. Pious saints performing miracles. The message is simple and relentless. The Imperium is good. Its enemies are evil. And obedience and sacrifice are the highest virtues. There is no subtlety, no moral ambiguity, no room for interpretation. It is a cultural diet of black and white, designed to create a simple, unquestioning worldview. Even something as simple as a board game or a deck of cards is suffused with this ideology. The most popular game in the Imperium is regicide, a form of chess where the pieces represent different units of the imperial hierarchy. The Emperor's Tarot is a deck of cards used for fortune-telling. But every card reinforces the tenets of the imperial creed. There is no escape. Every song, every story, every game is a lesson in obedience. The citizens' free time is not their own. It is simply another classroom, another indoctrination chamber, where the lessons are taught with blood and spectacle instead of a catechism book. The economy of the Imperium is not based on free trade or supply and demand. It is a feudal, post-apocalyptic system of obligation, requisition, and plunder. For the citizen, this means they have no economic freedom, no property rights, and no ability to improve their own station through hard work or innovation. Their role is that of a serf, bound to their assigned task, their life's output belonging not to them, but to their masters. The currency of the Imperium is not truly the throne gelt, or the various planetary scripts that are used for minor, local transactions. The true currency is the tithe. A planet's worth is measured by what it can provide to the greater Imperium. A citizen's worth is measured by what they can contribute to that tithe. They are, in essence, slaves, paid just enough in rations and shelter to keep them alive and working. This system creates a society of profound, institutionalized poverty. There is no middle class. There is only a vast, impoverished populace, and a tiny, unimaginably wealthy ruling elite. This elite consists of the imperial nobility, the high-ranking members of the ecclesiarchy and the administratum, and the rogue trader dynasties. They live in luxury that is almost impossible to comprehend, in palaces that glitter atop the Hive spires, their lives utterly divorced from the suffering of the masses below. They see the poverty of the populace not as a social problem to be solved, but as a necessary and desirable state of affairs. A hungry, desperate population is a compliant population. A wealthy, educated populace, they reason, would have the time and the resources to foment rebellion. The black market is the only semblance of a free economy that exists. In the shadows of the underhive and the back alleys of the great cities, a thriving trade exists in stolen goods, unsanctioned technology, forbidden knowledge, and illegal narcotics. For many citizens, participating in this black market is the only way to acquire the things they need to survive. Extra food, medicine for a sick child, a weapon for self-defense, but it is a dangerous game. The Arbites and the local enforcers are constantly cracking down on this illegal trade, and the punishment for being caught is severe. Furthermore, the black market is controlled by powerful criminal syndicates and hive gangs, who are often just as ruthless and exploitative as the official authorities. A citizen who turns to the black market is trading one form of servitude for another. An enforcer's log from the city of Tarsus on Scintilla gives a sense of this constant, unwinnable war. Conducted a raid on an unsanctioned market in the lower Habs. The usual contraband, unregistered firearms, Xenos artifacts, and a large quantity of the narcotic known as obscura. We apprehended 24 individuals. They will be processed and sent to the penal legions, but it is a futile effort. We shut down one market, and 2 more spring up in its place. The people are desperate. The system provides them with just enough to not die, so they turn to crime to truly live. It is a flaw in the very design of this city. We are not stamping out crime. We are merely managing it, like a gardener pruning a weed that will always grow back. This economic hopelessness is a cornerstone of imperial control. By denying the citizen any chance of prosperity, any hope of a better life through legitimate means, the Imperium ensures that they remain trapped, dependent, and focused solely on the struggle for daily survival. They are too busy trying to find their next meal to worry about abstract concepts like liberty or justice. The system is designed to keep them on their knees, for a man on his knees cannot rise up. The concept of health and medicine in the 41st millennium is a terrifying lottery. For the ruling elite, life-extending treatments, advanced bionics, and rejuvenation therapies can extend their lifespans for centuries. They are, for all practical purposes, immortal. For the average citizen, however, healthcare is a brutal, pragmatic, and often non-existent service. The Medicaid facilities in the lower levels of a hive or in a penal legion are not places of healing, they are butcher shops. The surgeons are often little more than sanctioned mechanics, working with unsterilized tools and a rudimentary understanding of human anatomy. Their primary purpose is not to heal the patient, but to get them back on the production line as quickly and as cheaply as possible. An injury that could be easily treated with modern medicine is often solved with a crude amputation. A diseased organ is not replaced with a carefully cloned substitute, but with a clunky, unreliable bionic that may reject the host or malfunction with catastrophic results. Anesthetics are a luxury. Most procedures are performed on a conscious, screaming patient. The most common medical tool is the chain scalpel. Disease is rampant. The crowded, unsanitary conditions of the hab blocks are a perfect breeding ground for plagues. The toxic environment causes a host of cancers, respiratory illnesses, and mutations. The Medicaid have few effective treatments. Most remedies are a combination of folklore, prayer, and the application of useless salves and tinctures. An outbreak of plague is often contained not with medicine, but with fire. The authorities will simply seal off the affected hab block and incinerate everyone inside, the healthy along with the sick. A quote from a Medicae in training's textbook on Gudrun illustrates the philosophy. The sanctity of the individual human life is a sentimental fiction. The health of the work unit, the platoon, the populace as a whole, is the only metric of concern. A surgeon's duty is not to the patient on his slab, but to the production quota that patient is failing to meet. If the cost of the resources required to save a life outweighs the value of that individual's future labor, then the most efficient course of action is to terminate the patient and allocate those resources elsewhere. This is not cruelty, it is the logic of survival. The emperor's work cannot be halted for the sake of a single failing component. Mental health is a concept that does not exist. The psychological toll of living in the Imperium, the constant fear, the trauma of violence, the grinding despair is immense. But there is no treatment, no therapy, no support. A citizen who breaks under the strain, who succumbs to what we would call PTSD or depression, is seen as weak, defective, or spiritually corrupt. They are often accused of being possessed or of falling to the temptations of chaos. The only treatment is a visit from a confessor who will prescribe penance and prayer, or, more likely, a bolt pistol to the head to purify the tainted soul. The citizen's body is not their own. It is a piece of biological machinery owned by the state. It is to be worked until it breaks, and then it is to be either crudely patched up or discarded and recycled. They live in a state of constant, low-level pain and sickness, a condition they have been taught to accept as normal. To be healthy is a privilege, not a right, and it is a privilege that is reserved for the powerful. The role of women in the Imperium is, for the most part, as bleak and circumscribed as that of men, but with its own unique set of horrors. The Imperium is a deeply patriarchal and misogynistic society. Its ideology shaped by 10,000 years of militaristic and feudal tradition. For the vast majority of female citizens, their primary role is defined by their biology. They are vessels for procreation, tasked with producing the next generation of imperial servants. Their value is measured by their fertility. A barren woman is often seen as cursed, a failure in her sacred duty to the emperor. They are subject to the same brutal labor and indoctrination as men, but they also face the constant threat of sexual violence and exploitation in a society where the powerful prey on the weak with impunity. The law offers little protection. A woman's testimony is often valued less than a man's, and the authorities are unlikely to intervene in what are considered domestic matters. However, the Imperium is also brutally pragmatic. It cannot afford to waste half of its population. Women are not barred from the military or the workforce. Indeed, vast numbers of them serve in the Imperial Guard, often in mixed-gender regiments, where they face the same horrors of the battlefield as their male counterparts. On some worlds, there are all-female regiments that are feared for their ferocity. In the manufactoriums, women work alongside men, their bodies just as easily broken by the relentless machinery. There are even a few rare paths to power for women. The most famous is the Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. These are the military wing of the ecclesiarchy, an army of warrior nuns who are among the most fanatically devoted and skilled fighters in the Imperium. To become a Sister of Battle is to escape the traditional female role, but it is to trade one cage for another. They are wedded to the emperor. Their lives a constant cycle of prayer, penance, and brutal warfare. They are indoctrinated to a degree that is extreme even by imperial standards. Their emotions suppressed, their humanity scoured away to make them into perfect weapons of faith. A line from the Creed of the Sisters of Battle highlights this. My body is a weapon, my faith is a shield, my mind is a fortress. I will suffer no weakness of the flesh, no doubt of the spirit, no impurity of the thought. I am a daughter of the emperor, and my only purpose is to deliver his wrath. Love is a weakness. Compassion is a flaw. There is only duty. For the average female citizen, however, such paths are a distant dream. Her life is a struggle against not only the oppressive systems of the state, but also the deeply ingrained misogyny of the culture. She is expected to be pious, subservient, and fertile, and to endure her suffering with silent stoicism. She is the backbone of the imperial family, the producer of its children, the silent, unacknowledged bedrock of its society. And for this, her reward is to be ignored, exploited, and forgotten. Her story is a silence within a silence, a tragedy that is rarely, if ever, told. The alien, the Xenos, is the ultimate other in the mind of the imperial citizen. From their earliest moments, they are taught a simple, unwavering doctrine. The alien is foul, corrupt, and monstrous, and its only purpose is to be exterminated. The human form is sacred, and all other forms of intelligent life are a blasphemous parody that must be cleansed from the galaxy in the name of the Emperor. This xenophobia is not just a prejudice. It is the foundational principle of the Imperium's foreign policy and its state religion. The citizen is shown an endless stream of terrifying propaganda depicting the horrors of the alien. The ravenous tyrannids, the cruel and elegant Aeldari, the brutish and comical orcs, the soulless, metallic Necrons, each is presented as a monolithic, one-dimensional threat, with no mention of their culture, their history, or their own internal complexities. The idea that one could negotiate with an alien, or coexist with them, is the most profound heresy imaginable. The phrase, "suffer, not the alien to live," is not a piece of advice. It is a holy commandment. This constant indoctrination creates a deep, primal fear of anything that is not human. For a citizen who has never left their own planet, the concept of the alien is the stuff of nightmares. A boogeyman used to justify the Imperium's endless wars and its oppressive internal policies. The threat of the alien is the ultimate justification for the sacrifices the citizen is forced to make. We may be harsh, the authorities say, but we are all that stands between you and the ravenous horrors of the void. However, the reality is that most citizens will never see an alien. Their interaction with the Xenos is limited to the propaganda they are fed and the occasional display of a captured, pathetic creature in a public plaza to be stoned and reviled by the crowd. But for those on frontier worlds, or on planets that become war zones, the alien is a terrifying reality. And in the crucible of war, the simple certainties of the propaganda can sometimes break down. We have a rare, unauthorized Vox log from an Imperial guardsman during the Damocles Gulf Crusade against the Tau Empire. The Tau are a young, technologically advanced Xenos race that believes in a philosophy of the greater good, seeking to unite all races under their rule. They told us the Tau were monsters, soulless creatures who wanted to destroy humanity. But yesterday, we overran one of their positions. We found a Medicae station. They were treating their wounded, and ours. There was a human there, a deserter. He said the Tau had given him food, medicine. He said they had asked him about his family. Our commissar shot him for being a traitor. Then he ordered us to burn the station. We did. We burned it all. But I saw the face of one of their medics as the flames took her. She didn't look like a monster. She just looked sad. I don't know what to believe anymore. The commissar says doubt is a weakness. He says the alien is cunning and uses our compassion against us. Maybe he's right, but I can't get her face out of my head. This kind of experience is rare, and to voice such doubts is a death sentence. For the vast majority of citizens, the xenophobia is absolute and unquestioning. It is a unifying force, a way of channeling all the fear, hatred, and frustration of their lives outwards, at a designated, non-human enemy. It is a simple, powerful, and brutally effective tool of control, and it ensures that the Imperium will always have a reason to fight, and that its citizens will always have a reason to die. Let us pull back the lens, from the individual life to the grand, tragic sweep of this civilization. The Imperium of Man is a paradox, an empire of lies that, in some respects, is built upon a terrible truth. The galaxy is indeed a hostile and terrifying place. The threats of chaos, of the Tyranids, of the Necrons, are real and existential. The core argument of the Imperium that only through unity, discipline, and absolute faith can humanity survive is not entirely without merit. But the tragedy is in the path it has chosen. In its fight against the monstrous, the Imperium has become a monster itself. It has sacrificed everything that makes humanity worth saving: compassion, creativity, freedom, love, in the name of survival. It has created a society that is, for the vast majority of its citizens, a living hell, a slow, grinding damnation that is arguably worse than the quick, clean death offered by its enemies. This is the ultimate, horrifying truth of the planetary citizen's life. They are not merely oppressed or exploited. They are the living sacrifice, the blood offering laid upon the altar of human survival. Their suffering is the fuel that keeps the dying light of the Imperium burning for one more day. They are the prisoners who are told that their prison is the only thing keeping the wolves at bay, and they are forced to kiss the bars and praise the jailer. A final, fragmented text, believed to have been written by a philosopher on a world just before its extermination by the Inquisition, poses the final, unanswerable question. The author is unknown. The text is called The Last Doubt. We have survived for 10,000 years. This is our boast. This is our justification for all the horrors we have committed, for all the souls we have crushed. But what, truly, has survived? Is it humanity? Or is it just the shape of humanity, a hollowed-out effigy animated by fear and hate? We have built a machine to protect us from the dark, but the machine has consumed us. We have become cogs, fuel, and raw material for its endless, grinding operation. We have forgotten the reason for the war, and now the war is the only reason we have left. The question is not, can we survive? The question is, should we? If the price of survival is the loss of our soul, is it a price worth paying? Look at the faces in the street. Look at the eyes of your own children. There is no joy there. There is no hope. There is only the dull, gray ember of endurance. This is not life. This is a state of perpetual dying. Perhaps the greatest heresy is not to question the emperor, but to question the very premise of our existence. Perhaps the most courageous act is not to die for the Imperium, but to dare to imagine a world where the Imperium is no longer necessary. The text ends there. The world it was written on is now a dead rock, its memory erased from all records. But the question remains, hanging in the void, a silent testament to the trillions of lives crushed beneath the weight of the twin-headed eagle. The life of the planetary citizen is a horror story written on a galactic scale, a tale of a species that has lost its way in the dark and has chosen to become the darkness in order to survive it. And in the grim future of the 41st millennium, there is no sign of the dawn. The cyclical nature of the citizen's existence is a horror in itself, a perfect, closed loop of futility. Consider the birth of a child. It is a moment of potential, yet that potential is immediately circumscribed by the world it enters. If born on a hive world, its destiny is the manufactorum. If on a forge world, its destiny is the servitor slab. If on an agri-world, its destiny is the plow. There is no choice, no mobility, no escape. The path is set from the first, gasping, polluted breath. The education that follows is not an opening of the mind, but a narrowing. It is a process of forging a human soul into a specific, predetermined tool. The catechisms of the ecclesiarchy, the technical litanies of the mechanicus, the production quotas of the factorum, these are the only lessons. Curiosity is punished, creativity is suppressed, and doubt is a death sentence. The mind is locked in a cage long before the body is put to work. Then comes the life of labor. It is a slow, methodical draining of vitality. The body is broken by repetitive, dangerous work. The spirit is crushed by the sheer, unending monotony. The citizen toils not to build a better future for their children, for they know their children's future will be identical to their own. They work simply to earn their continued existence, to be granted another cycle's worth of rations and recycled air. They are a hamster on a wheel, running faster and faster simply to stay in the same place. The institutions of control, the church, the state, the law are a constant presence, ensuring that no one ever steps off the designated path. They are a web of fear, bureaucracy, and faith that ensnares the citizen from every angle, making rebellion not just dangerous, but unthinkable. To even conceive of a different life is a monumental act of imagination, an act that is systematically discouraged and punished. And so the citizen ages, their body, worn out by a lifetime of abuse and neglect, begins to fail. They become less productive, a drain on the system. They are cast aside, replaced by the next generation of fresh, strong bodies that are lining up to take their place on the great, grinding wheel. Death is the final act of service. The body is recycled, its constituent parts fed back into the very system that consumed its life. The soul, if the heretical whispers are to be believed, is consumed by the very God they worshipped, a final offering of fuel to a dying empire. And as this citizen is processed and forgotten, their child is just beginning their own work shift. The siren wails, the machinery roars, and the cycle begins anew. It is a perfect, self-sustaining engine of suffering. It is a snake eating its own tail for eternity. This is the horrifying, unspoken truth that lies at the heart of the Imperium. It is not a civilization in progress. It is not a society building towards a better future. It is a static, unchanging, and perpetual machine of sacrifice. The citizen's life is horrifying not just because of the poverty, the violence, or the oppression. It is horrifying because it is utterly, profoundly, and inescapably meaningless. Their suffering changes nothing. Their sacrifice achieves nothing, other than the continuation of the suffering of others. They are born to turn the wheel, and the wheel's only purpose is to grind them into dust. In the final analysis, the life of a planetary citizen in Warhammer 40,000 is the most profound horror the setting has to offer. It is a horror that is more intimate and more insidious than that of any slavering daemon or ravenous alien. It is the horror of a humanity that has turned upon itself, that has systematized cruelty, and has sanctified despair. The citizen's life is a journey through a series of prisons. There is the physical prison of the Hive city, a vertical tomb where the sun is a myth and the air is poison. There is the economic prison of feudal serfdom, where a life of backbreaking labor earns only a subsistence-level existence. There is the social prison of a rigid caste system, where birth determines destiny and there is no hope of advancement. There is the linguistic prison of a controlled vocabulary, which robs the citizen of the very words needed to articulate their own oppression. There is the intellectual prison of a censored history and a dogmatic science, which smothers curiosity and enforces a state of perpetual ignorance. There is the spiritual prison of a fanatical religion, which demands absolute faith and offers only suffering in this life and potential damnation in the next. And finally, there is the psychological prison of cultivated fear, a pervasive paranoia that turns neighbor against neighbor, child against parent, and convinces the citizen that the walls of their cage are the only thing protecting them from a hostile universe. The citizen is a victim of a crime so vast, so total, that it has become the very fabric of their reality. They are the subjects of a galactic-scale abusive relationship, taught to love their tormentor and to see their own suffering as a sign of their devotion. They are told they are the bastion of humanity, the bulwark against the darkness. But this is the final, most cruel lie. They are not the wall, they are the bricks. They are the disposable, interchangeable, and forgotten components from which the crumbling, blood-soaked wall of the Imperium is built. So when we look at the grand tapestry of the 41st millennium, with its demigods and starships, its epic battles and cosmic stakes, let us not forget the silent, anonymous figures in the background. The factory worker with coal dust in his lungs, the serf with mud on her hands, the child who has never seen the sky. Their story has no glory, it has no heroes. But it is the true story of the Imperium of Man. It is a story of a quiet, unending holocaust, a sacrifice of the human soul on the altar of a grim, dark, and ultimately futile survival. And the silence of their suffering is the loudest sound in a galaxy of unending war. What, then, is the purpose of this examination? Is it merely to catalog the depths of a fictional despair, an exercise in the grim and the grotesque? No. The story of the imperial citizen, in all its exaggerated, Gothic horror, serves as a dark mirror. It is a cautionary tale, a grand, operatic exploration of the dangers of dogma, the poison of xenophobia, and the cost of sacrificing liberty for the promise of security. It takes the latent fears of our own world, the fear of dehumanizing bureaucracy, of environmental collapse, of ideological extremism, of endless war, and it amplifies them to a galactic scale, forcing us to confront their ultimate conclusions. The citizen's life is a testament to the idea that the methods used to fight a war can be as destructive as the enemy itself. The Imperium set out to save humanity from the horrors of the void, but in doing so, it created a horror of its own, a meticulously crafted and self-sustaining system of human misery. It is a warning that a society that fears its own people more than its enemies is a society that has already lost. The citizen is taught to hate the alien, the mutant, the heretic. But the narrative shows us that the true enemy is the system itself, the faceless administrator who condemns a world to starvation with a clerical error, the priest who preaches hatred as a form of love, the general who sees his soldiers not as men, but as ammunition. This is the subtle, conspiratorial truth that the narrative reveals. The monsters are not just at the gates, they are on the throne, in the pulpit, and behind the desk. They are the architects of the cage. And so, the citizen's life becomes a philosophical battleground. It forces us to ask the most fundamental questions. What is the value of a human life? What is the purpose of a civilization? Is survival at any cost truly survival? The Imperium has chosen its answer. The individual is worthless. The purpose of civilization is to perpetuate itself, and survival is the only virtue. The somber, foreboding tone of the narrative is a silent judgment on that answer. It suggests that a species that has forgotten compassion, that has abandoned reason, and that has sacrificed its own soul, has not survived at all. It has merely become a ghost, a specter of its former self, haunting the ruins of its own ambition. The story of the planetary citizen is a requiem for a lost humanity. It is an elegy for the trillions of forgotten souls who have been ground to dust by the gears of a machine they were told was their salvation. And it leaves us with a final chilling question, one that echoes from the grim darkness of the far future back into our own present world. What parts of our own humanity are we willing to sacrifice for the promise of a safer tomorrow? And what will be left of us when the price has been paid?